This is video number 2 with the puppy, and it's time for me to jump into a February reading wrap-up. Starting with 2-star reads, Boca Raton by Lauren Roth. This story had excellent writing and fine pacing for what it was trying to do, but it was just really weird. Like, it was weaving a lot of disparate elements together and not quite sticking the landing on it. And it definitely had me scratching my head at points, vaguely give the benefit of the doubt, but at the end of the day I was like, why was that even incorporated? Somewhere in there there's a great ghost story or like cursed home story, but while the overall execution is disappointing, the reason it's sitting here at 2 stars is because I really didn't care for the messaging on it. The novella is about a woman who is concerned about global warming and is trying to be a good steward to the environment, and she's slowly becoming unraveled and detached from reality. Her fervor for the environment seems to be equated to being part of a doomsday cult, and her concern about global warming ending everything is compared to like the rapture. And also what set this protagonist down the path of becoming untethered from reality is a scene where she decides to clean up a river and find some chicks that have been killed due to pollution. And throughout the story, she seems to be getting increasingly upset about their careless, pointless death. Like, it kind of felt to me like they were implying that people who would be upset by that kind of thing are mentally unstable or teetering on the edge, or like if you're the kind of person that finds that upsetting, it's very easy to push you over into another reality. I don't know. I didn't like that the person's sensitivity and caring about how humanity's thoughtlessness is destructive seems to be like equated to not being fit to live in a sane mental reality. As a writer, I can see this thing coming into fruition as just like a small creative project and seen as a challenge to sort of complete more than something that was looked at as a whole for the messaging. And I honestly hope that's what it is, because I really would like to think the author doesn't believe some of the messaging here about environmentalism. Moving into 3 stars, Pack of Lies by Olivia Lewine. This is an alpha, omega, why choose paranormal-ish fantasy. It would have been an easy 4 stars if it had been about 150 pages shorter. But the basic premise is there's some illegal experimentation going on omegas. Our protagonist is part of this group. She survived the main experimentation but is living with some crippling side effects that include having like 1/16 of her scent available to her. And she ends up meeting her scent-matched alphas while they break into this experimental facility and try to destroy it. And of course she doesn't believe them because she can't really smell them very well. It's interesting in a lot of levels because, like, if scent matching is like finding your soulmate, there should be other things that click and work. And this book kind of like explores what else is there when the main gimmick or draw isn't working. Another thing I really liked about it is like this pack that broke into the research facility is hiding things from her. And there's this like her being distrustful and needing to heal from the whole scenario, and them not really helping that but continuing to be a little bit shady. So there's some fun relationship building, good dynamics. There's like a secret pack reveal later on. It's not that far on for us as readers, so I don't feel like I just spoiled anything, but it is way further on for our protagonist. One of the main alphas in the pack is like a huge a-hole, and this is one of the few ones of these where I feel like they gave him a worthwhile redemption arc. Like, he pays for his wrongdoing in a way that feels valid. He drags his feet like a very long time to acknowledge that he was wrong, but once he's on the boat ready to say like, yeah, that wasn't cool of me, he goes all in on it, and I just really appreciated that too. Next is Undercover by Tamsin Muir. This is part of the Into Shadow series. Fine. It kept my interest because Muir just kind of dumps us into this world without any kind of information, and it's very different than ours, like the rules, what's in play, all that kind of stuff. And in that way, it's kind of like a double investigation because we're following like an undercover operative trying to figure out this mafia scenario, and we ourselves are also trying to figure out what's going on in this world, who are the good or the bad guys, why is this person acting this way. And there's a twist reveal at the end that you don't see coming, or at least I didn't see coming. Mostly the world itself was so confusing and poorly explained, but I liked that twist, and I liked how it made me think about scenes that happened in the front of the book differently after that information was given to me. The writing in it is a little bit awkward to me. For something that just throws you into a world with no explanations, it gives you a lot of exposition dumps on random stuff at random times that feels really slow and oddly paced. This is the only Into Shadow book I think I would have preferred reading versus listening to, and I do feel like I lost some of the details in listening to it versus reading. I also think that this is better as horror than it is as fantasy, and it's like horror that borders on sci-fi more than it does fantasy in my personal opinion. Out of the Mirror Darkness by Garth Nix. This was a good little story. It's nothing too deep, but it's giving great fantasy adventure vibes. Part of what I liked about it is the characters and the world felt so established. I sort of felt like I was picking a novella up going on in between a larger series that involved Harper and Mrs. Hope. And you know what? I'd really like to read that novella series if it ever existed. It's fun, it's not too serious, it's great for a little bit of escapism or for like light vacation kind of reads. Next is We Have Summoned by Judith Sonnet. I DNF'd this book at 10%. It was trending more towards 2 stars than 3 stars when I DNF'd it, but I felt like I hadn't really given it enough time to unfold. The pacing was moving just a little bit too slowly, everything was just a little too unpleasant and unlikable, and I realized I wasn't in the mood for it. I think it's probably executing well on what it's meant to do. Like, folk horror usually takes its time to unfold, and you need characters that are a little bit more complex, not pure good or pure bad. So like this mishmash that I wasn't necessarily enjoying is the right thing for this genre and probably for where the story was going. It just wasn't the right thing for my mood. Moving into 4 stars, House of the Omega by Roxy Collins. This is another alpha omega why choose romance, except our main character is a beta, and that alone puts it into like a 4-star review for me because I love alpha omega universes where we talk about betas instead of the alpha omegas. The fact that we have like an omega courting this beta and the omega sort of taking charge, being really interested in them, the fact the beta needs a lot of healing and understanding, and then the fact that we like wrap all of this in by like an alpha pack that wants this omega and is willing to do like a join with both the beta and the omega to get them all come together. Really fun. Also, House Omega is a fashion label, so there's all that like fun fashion element and like high-end talk there that's sometimes really fun to read. And this is one of those books that I felt like made great use of its time. Each of the characters feels like they're fully developed, they get an emotional arc, and they have a point within the plot besides just like steamy scenes and stuff. Also, shout out to Roxy Collins as an author because this book was just really well written for an alpha omega story. I don't think I caught any like grammar errors or awkward phrasing or poor writing or even stereotypical writing the whole way through. This one was just like a step above where you'll find most alpha omega romances. And the other thing I like about it is I had read some Roxy Collins last year. I think it was the Omega Merger, and I gave it 3 stars because it wasn't quite giving me enough business and character tension, and this one really like shows her evolution as an author. Next is The Candles Are Burning by Veronica G. Henry. I liked this one. I really enjoyed this story, but it was hard for me to review because compared to some of the other heavy hitters in the Into Shadow series, this one felt like a bit of fluff. At the end of the day, I decided I loved the characters, I loved their arcs, I loved the setting that Veronica G. Henry gave us, like a historical magical fantasy element. It's probably a little bit closer to 5 stars than 4 stars. It ends up getting a 4-star rating because I didn't find it like to be a very memorable story once everything was done. Like, there's no overarching themes that I personally picked out. Instead, it's just a story that is going through this one woman's point in time and getting through the death of her husband, trying to figure out how to move on, while at the same time confronting some magical elements of her past that have sort of arisen at this time. And last is The Way the World Ends by Jess Walter. This is the first book in the Amazon Originals Warmer collection. I liked it. It has solid construction and it was a pleasant read. It wasn't saying anything I didn't already know or expressing something in a super novel way, but this is a book that was highly relatable to me as someone who is fairly progressive, especially on environmental issues, grew up in the North, moved to the South. There's just a lot of things intersecting there, made this like a fun read for me personally and really relatable. I also really liked how we were combining a lot of different issues together and sort of like comparing them and exploring their intersectionality. In this case, we've got like a student who's just come out as gay, trying to organize a parade. The parade is being denied by these old Southern town folks, and at the same time, everyone around them is like sort of denying climate change. They're looking for this new professor, and they're having a hard time finding someone who's not like a climate change extremist. All of it is harkening back to this like holding on to tradition, the way things were done before. It was good enough for my fathers, it's good enough for me kind of element. And like this idea that you're just totally in denial about what's going on or why it's going on. There's this element of sameness about it that's very hard to explain for me in words, but I could feel it when I was reading this book, which made it really enjoyable. Another thing I loved about it is that the professors are all encouraging this young gay student to like have the parade anyways and march through the town and make them arrest him. And I felt like this was such an irresponsible advice for these professors to be giving this student. And the student really goes out of their way to sort of like outline mentally to the readers why this information was irresponsible, why it was reckless, and why it was actually the opposite of supportive in a lot of ways, not considering his future. And I like that little caricature of the well-meaning, enlightened liberal who's trying to be supportive and actually doing the exact opposite. I don't know, it was a fun little wrapper of a story. I really liked it. Great start to the Warmer collection. That's really all I had time to read this month. I got a puppy in the beginning of February and I've been sort of struggling to balance everything out. I had a good time with what I read, but I'm hoping to pick up a little bit more in March. But talk to me. What was your favorite read this past February? Tell me in those comments down below. And as always, keep reading. Bye!